I'm Adrian, and today we're taking a critical look at CW's Arrow to see just how similar he is to Batman. I'd like to start out by saying that I think Arrow is a really fun and entertaining show, and I have watched all 4 seasons and what has been shown so far from the 5th. The purpose behind this video is to explore all the reasons as to why fans have pointed out that Arrow is incredibly similar to Batman. Also, this video will show Batman as he is represented in the comics, films, and games, but on the Green Arrow side, it will remain exclusively focused on how he is depicted in CW's Arrow. It's really cool that we've been getting hints that Batman exists in the so-called Arrowverse, but in reality, we already have a Batman in the Arrowverse, and his name is Oliver Queen. It goes without saying that I will be discussing several plot points from both CW's Arrow and the Batman mythos, so this is your spoiler warning. Without further ado, let's take a look at all the reasons as to why Green Arrow is basically Batman on CW's Arrow. Bruce Wayne lost his parents when they were shot by Joe Chill. He decided to use all the money in his power to turn himself into an extremely well-equipped crime-fighting machine to protect the people of Gotham so that a tragedy such as this would never happen to another person again. On Arrow's side, billionaire Oliver Queen was shipwrecked on a mysterious island, and his father committed suicide right in front of him so that he would have enough provisions to live. Due to a series of tragedies and events on the island, and eventually off of it, Oliver was no longer the clueless and egotistical kid he used to be, and had turned into a well-trained and intelligent man. Upon definitively returning to Starling City, later Star City, he vowed to become a tool in dispensing justice to protect its people from being ruled by its seedy underworld. In other words, on both sides of the field, we are dealing with obscenely rich men who, after suffering a terrible family tragedy, become masked vigilantes on a quest for justice, not vengeance. This quest for justice, not vengeance, is an important concept both these heroes abide by. It is well known that one of Batman's cardinal rules is to never kill. And yes, I will put an aside right here to clarify that in earlier versions of Batman in the comics, he does in fact kill people with no problem, and even kills in Batman vs Superman, but it is generally a well-respected rule of Batman's character. Returning to the point, Batman never kills, even though he may very well want to deep down inside, but he believes that if he would go down a path he would never return from, and turn into something just as bad as the villains he is fighting. It would no longer be justice, but vengeance. Bruce makes a point to show this concept to his son Damian in the animated films. Oliver Queen initially killed his enemies with no qualms, believing that they were all essentially bad people, but later comes to realize that he must be better than them, and resolves that he will never kill his enemies, unless he sees no other way out, such as when he killed Ra's al Ghul. He readily states several times in the series that they are on a quest for justice, not vengeance. In conclusion, both heroes have the cardinal rule that they will not kill their enemies. Bruce Wayne doesn't like to rely on others, but the one man he trusts wholeheartedly and respects to an unimaginable degree is the same man who raised him and has remained a valuable and integral ally to the identity of Batman, his butler, Alfred Pennyworth. He is the go-to man in any operation Batman undertakes, and the one guy who he will risk anything to save. In an extremely similar manner, Oliver Queen first trusts his bodyguard John Diggle. He didn't raise Oliver, but Oliver respects him and values his opinion and will almost always take his advice, whether it be on life-threatening issues or even on simpler things like listening to his heart. And just like Batman, the Green Arrow will do anything to save him. In the start of his journey, Batman could only rely on Alfred as he was the only one who knew his secret identity. And similarly, in the earlier episodes, Arrow could only rely on Diggle as he was the only one who knew his secret identity. Both these men also need a base of operations, and they have built their own respective places. In Batman's case, he calls this base the Batcave, and sometimes it's a literal cave, but sometimes it's just a command center where he stores all his technology and suits and the ever-trusty Bat computer. In Arrow's case, he initially constructs his base of operations, sometimes called Arrow Cave, underneath the nightclub he owned, as there is always a potential alibi for why he's there. He later moves the base to underneath the office he's running for mayor in and greatly expands the room in there. But the fact remains that this is also a secret place for him to store all his equipment and suits and computer work. But instead of doing it himself or relying on Diggle, he comes to rely on Felicity, which brings us to the expanded teams element. Batman prefers above all else to work alone, but has recruited quite a formidable team of fellow crime fighters, sometimes referred to as the Bat Family. He's trained 3 Robins, one who went on to become Nightwing. He has also worked with Batgirl and Batwing. Arrow, although initially starting his quest for justice with only Diggle on his side, came to form an ever-expanding team of fellow crime fighters. It began with Felicity, who did all the computer work, and then expanded to Black Canary, Arsenal, Speedy, who inherited Arsenal's mantle, and even Diggle began to join in on the fights as Spartan. He later recruited a new team including Ragman, Mr. Terrific, Wild Dog, and Artemis. In other words, Arrow built a street-level crime-fighting team just like Batman did. Furthermore, Felicity went on to serve the exact same role that Batgirl did when she was crippled by the Joker. When this happened, Barbara Gordon, or Batgirl, was no longer able to join Batman on the field, but lent her computer expertise to Batman by providing intelligence to his operations and changed her handle to Oracle. Felicity herself is even temporarily crippled during the show and became known as Overwatch, The writers even gave a small nod to the fact that she had also become a wheelchair-bound intelligence provider by joking that Arrow had considered calling her Oracle, but it was taken. Staying on topic with these allies, perhaps the most mysterious romantic interest, frenemy of Batman, is Selina Kyle. She's a thief who possesses extraordinary acrobatic abilities and great skill in martial arts. Although she can be Batman's enemy, she has been romantically linked to him several times across the games, comics, and the films. Sometimes she does turn into a better person, but sometimes she remains a thief. On Arrow's side, we have Huntress, who plays Catwoman's role. He even trusted her with his secret identity, just like Bruce did with Catwoman. The unique part in Oliver's case is that he's the one who came up with her alter ego. However, just like Catwoman with Batman, the two don't always see eye to eye, and it's what eventually led to the rift between the two. In Arrow's case, she turned into a flat-out villain for Arrow, and yes, while this can also be argued for the original Black Canary in that she did decide to leave Arrow, she was never a flat-out enemy to him, like Huntress. As such, both Batman and Arrow have their femme fatale superhero figure, Catwoman and Huntress, respectively. This brings us to the other big similarity between Batman and Green Arrow, and that is their utterly and most easily exploitable weakness, women. Though he may be trained in over 100 martial arts, Batman becomes silly putty when he's in the presence of a woman he likes, be it Vicky Vale, Julie Madison, Catwoman, and even hooks up with the likes of Black Canary and Lois Lane. He will readily disclose his secret identity, as How It Should Have Ended has mocked endlessly with their videos, and endanger his own safety for them. Much in the same way, Green Arrow also has a severe weakness for women. He has had several romantic partners on the show already, including Shadow, Laurel Lance, Sarah Lance, Helena Bertinelli, Felicity Smoke, and more. More often than not, he will risk life and limb for them and readily disclose his secret identity as well. And although John Diggle continually reprimands him and tries to prevent him from making another woman-related mistake, he rarely heeds his advice when it comes to women. As such, the kryptonite to both Batman and Green Arrow is women. Batman and Green Arrow also share a very large personality trait. They both carry the weight of the world on their shoulders and typically blame themselves for any sort of tragedy. Batman has blamed himself for several tragedies to unfold in his life, and in the same way, Oliver Queen can't help but hold himself responsible for anything that happens to his team. In other words, both are brooding, angst-filled, self-blaming vigilantes who also share a knack for disguising their voices. Batman typically lowers the pitch of his voice to a more threatening tone, as seen with Kevin Conroy's interpretation of Bruce Wayne and Batman. A more comedic version of this is seen with Christian Bale's infamous Batman voice, that later inspired Will Arnett's take on the character in Lego Batman. He also disguises his voice through a built-in voice modifier in his cowl in Batman vs Superman, something Green Arrow actually does as well, although Arrow's voice modifier works while being in close proximity to him. In all fairness, the TV show did show the voice modifier gadget before Batman started to use one in Batman vs Superman, but the fact remains they both disguise their voice by lowering it. And why do they need to disguise their voices? To obviously hide their identity from criminals, but to a greater extent to be able to interact with others who would be willing to help their respective alter egos. In Batman's case, perhaps his greatest ally outside of Alfred is Commissioner Gordon. Even though he had to work hard to earn his trust, the Commissioner would always be willing to stick his neck out for Batman because he believed in what he was doing was right. Much in the exact same manner, Green Arrow also had to work extremely hard to earn the trust of police officer Quentin Larry Lance. But once earned, he never hesitates in helping Arrow in any way he can, and appreciates their chats in either rooftops or alleys. He doesn't use a bat signal though, instead relying on a cell phone to call Arrow. However, unlike Commissioner Gordon, Lance does frequently doubt Arrow and sometimes actively tries to take him down. As far as their crime fighting methods go, both Batman and Green Arrow operate in extremely similar circumstances. Both wear a tactical crime fighting suit. Although Batman's suit does far surpass Arrow's in terms of functionality, both only go out at the dead of night, both know a great deal of martial arts, and if you'd like to know exactly how many each of them know, I've done in-depth videos analyzing their fighting styles, which you can see by clicking on the cards above. Both usually take out the lights before storming into the room and taking everyone out in a blink of an eye, although regrettably, in latter seasons, Arrow seems incapable of taking control of a room by himself, and both also employ gadgets. The most similar one being the grappling gun. Batman's is a literal gun that is capable of lifting him to wherever he needs to be, while Arrow's is integrated into his bow and arrow, but serves the exact same purpose of enabling him to jump off rooftops with ease or to evacuate a room at a moment's notice. Another common element between the two are the villains the show has directly lifted from Batman. Deathstroke and Deadshot are both typically Batman's enemies, but perhaps the most egregious lift from the Batman mythos was Ra's al Ghul, the very leader of the League of Assassins who above all else wants Batman to take his place. Batman of course refuses. Meanwhile in Arrow, Ra's al Ghul is also in command of the League of Assassins, but desperately wants Arrow to take his place. In this case, Arrow agrees to be trained by him as he's setting up a larger deception, but the fact of the matter remains that Ra's al Ghul wanting a successor is a Batman storyline. Bruce Wayne and Oliver Queen also adopt a very similar persona, that of being a party-driven, egotistical, boneheaded playboy gazillionaire. Who would ever expect that the simple-minded billionaire was a brilliant crime fighter by night? Sure, Oliver does eventually tone down this facade for that of a level-headed and enthusiastic mayor, but the fact remains that his initial go-to persona was the same as Batman's. So there you have it. Due to all of the reasons mentioned in this video, CW's Green Arrow is basically Batman. What do you think of the show? Do you prefer Batman or Green Arrow? Let me know in the comments below and be sure to subscribe, and you can follow me on my Twitter, Instagram, and brand new Facebook fan page, Godzilla Rex, to be notified when another new episode premieres. It would also be great if you could join my Patreon to get access to cool behind the scenes stuff and a bunch of other rewards. See you next time.